Hi, my name is Georgina Escobar. I am a playwright and director, I guess. Milagro actually made me a director for whatever that means. I came into Milagro in 2016 after being invited to be the playwright behind their Day of the Dead show. That year, they wanted to focus on the homeless, and specifically the homeless population of Portland. And I came along to devise a new play with the cast, a cast that I didn't know. The magic of Milagro really comes from being able to matchmake and put together teams of people who are all about the collaborative environment. With that reason, I came onto the project day one with 3 songs in mind that I knew would be the anchors. Music is really how I started my artistic life, and music is still how I start a lot of my artistic endeavors. So I came into El Muerto Vagabundo knowing that I wanted to use 3 songs to sort of frame our world. One of those songs was the classic 1950s El Gato Viudo, which is familiar to a lot of families, a lot of people from Mexico. It was a 1950s song I believe by Pedro Infante, and other renditions. And I wanted to make that sort of our motif and our playful song for De Vagabundo, for the tramp. So every time he showed up on stage, he would have his theme song. The second song that I wanted to use for Muerto Vagabundo was a song that I grew up listening to that my grandmother would sing called El Marinero. El Marinero, I never really knew the origins of the story or the history behind it. I just knew that it was a song that my grandmother used to sing to and with us, and I wanted to invite that into the room since she has Alzheimer's. So we used that. I interpreted that in a different way for them. And the third song that I really wanted to use for this was a song known as La Cigarra. It is a huapango originally. Natalia Lafourcade did a rearrangement of it, and I wanted to add that. So adding the musical elements to El Muerto Vagabundo allowed me to then craft each character to have their musical soundscape. I then asked the actors to enhance that and bring in their own instincts of musical tones. I kind of try to frame it like Peter and the Wolf, whereas each character was representative of an instrument. I try to engage with what instrument their makeup had as characters in the play. The play then was shaped. I went off and wrote it, and we built a smorgasbord of stagecraft and musical landscape to frame our stories for each of the characters in the piece, all wrapped around the idea of the Day of the Dead. The third opportunity I had to work with Milagro was another Teatro Milagro show. It was an original commission. I wrote and directed it called B.I.B. And for that show, similarly to El Payaso, I wanted the Foley table to be fully accessible, and this time it was disguised. It was a sci-fi world, so the technology could be fully visible. It didn't necessarily have Foley, but it had the music. And for that one, I let go a little bit of my musical composition preference, and Lawrence came on to design it and threw in some really cool, interesting sounds my way that really actually helped to then work with the choreography. Because I was only part-time director for that show, I was able to work with a choreographer, and she basically built the physical body of the text based on Lawrence's music and on my text and that bilingual text that we had collected from people from the community. So the theme that really intrigued me was Alebrijes. Well, the theme itself was fantastical, fantasy and myth, fantastical creatures, fantastical themes. And for that, the Day of the Dead show, I was happy to pitch the idea of Pedro Linares, who is the creator of the Alebrijes, and his story. Of course, there are many tellings of his story. It's become mythicized at this point. So for me, the challenge was to really create something that was a Mexican fairy tale, basically based on this character's, inspired by this character's life, but with creative liberties on that. As we know, Alebrijes and Dia de los Muertos have nothing to do with one another, but Coco went ahead and did it anyway, so I figured, why can't we look at why Pedro Linares could have been inspired to create these creatures? And it was indeed a close-to-death encounter. So with that, we spun it off and created a very fun piece about Pedro Linares and his totems, his animals, and how that inspired his creation of the fantastical creatures, the Alebrijes. For this particular piece, I also came onto the project, unlike El Muerto Vagabundo, it was less devised. I came into the project with a full script. However, I did come also with a blank slate of a few songs that I knew I wanted to utilize, and more specifically, a composer that I wanted to work with, and this was Luis Guerra. We had worked together before on a musical called Fire Rock, and this time my goal was to engage either existing stuff that he had created that can be repurposed, and as well as new arrangements and new compositions specifically for the show. So Luis came along and did an original arrangement of La Llorona for us. He also did a new theme song for Alebrijes, and here's a little bit of all of those things sort of spliced together with photos and videos for you to enjoy. I just wanted to share my beautiful experience at Milagro based on music and experimentation and the ability to take this to production. Ciao.